Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer1745 here with my continuing playthrough of Hearts of Iron 3 with Black Ice 9.11 and a whole lot of other mods, just about everything that's compatible, just about, not quite. And we're going to continue this. Now, I have some concerns here. One, is my army big enough? I definitely know I have less ICs than I did in the last couple of playthroughs because of those IC limiting stuff. I don't think I ever unrealistically spam things. But it's definitely limited my ICs. And even if ICs today are just a little bit over or a little bit under, whatever it is, it's the build-up has definitely been less. And so that's one question I have. And yes, I could start Barbarossa right now, but is it a good idea to? And so I'm looking right now, just getting ready here, and even then I still don't think I'll be ready. These guys are trying to get, now they're going to move a little bit faster now that they're out from under the, getting through the slack of, because it had been zero infrastructure, long battles there. Moving slowly. Won't be fully ready, but probably trying to go by June 1. That's 30 days. 30 days delayed. And that's a major delay. So, have that problem. Smaller army, delays. I don't know. I know, I thought of it, well, just shall we say, it's crossed my mind that, should I delay it a whole year? I'm not worried about Soviet buildup so much, but that is an issue. More it's for this series here, just another year of me expanding into Africa and India and whatnot, and that's so doable, and but probably not all that interesting. So we're gonna go with this, but I'm just worried. Okay, radios have advanced. Very good. And armored fighting vehicle, anti-aircraft weapons have advanced to fully spell out that acronym for you guys, what all that means. Okay, let's go back to electronics. Yeah, I'm doing the pushing a year in advance for improving our computing capabilities. And let's do tank radios. The tanks can talk to each other better, more effectively. Okay, yes. We are invading down here. Let's come back up here. A couple of things to do. One, hold down the shift key. We're going to add another destroyer to the Tirpitz and Graf Zeppelin group to make them a little better cushioned. Okay, we need to got some yeah, I think you can just make the dash the best. Come down here, pick up some units. These guys here, they could be picked up. They've sort of gotten abandoned and left out here just because I haven't been able to move them in a timely manner. Okay. Here's some help to that. But honestly, I feel I'm abandoned. Oh, no. Move. Rebase to there because we want to pick those up. Now, I don't think, because I didn't go in and re-edit, we're not going to be facing the original Operation Torch, because we control Gibraltar and other places. So I don't think we'll have that to worry about. But of course, we may very well have invasions to worry about, other scripted invasions to worry about. Okay, TAC pilot training. Good. What's the other one here? Looks like assault gun upgrade. This really fast. So we've got that upgrade. Graded. And oh, we need to put supplies down to here. Make sure we keep supplied. Everybody on board the boats. Yeah, let's send you guys to here, I think. No, let's send you guys to here, pick up those anti-aircraft guns on the way. They should be there by then. Very close to that. We're moving big chunks of the army down here. Still undecided of whether I should try to attack out of here at the beginning of Barbarossa, or let them shift forces up to meet once Barbarossa is going, and then attack them in there. When it's empty. Rolling artillery barrages, very good. Now we can help out our SS units, I guess. Probably should have been doing that all along. So there used to be something negative about those, and I don't remember what it was. It sort of kept me from doing that before. Just got out of the habit. Okay, well. You guys, in preparation, come out here and patrol. Guys, come up here and patrol. You guys come up here and patrol. Get on board. Those are the main guys that I want to move north, or all the guys I want to move north. Oh, they got on board the wrong boats. Okay. Everybody. Oh, we can load them onto the Deutschland? It's not working out. Okay. Unload. The ones that no. about this, the way this is working. Gotta sort of click through it. Now you're on the Deutschland. Okay. Get off. You're where you're supposed to be. Get off. Okay. Sort of guarantee or more guarantee. I'll walk through it. There we go. Mountain divisions coming up here, I think, will be good for us. These guys can patrol up here, in the middle. Okay, 4-engine bomber crew layout has advanced. Very good. Area that we are mostly overlooking, I guess. And spotting advance. That's down here. How to look out with binoculars. 101. Cruiser warfare or carrier crew training or carrier crew training, even though we only have, or light cruiser training. We hardly have any of those either. We'll do carrier crew. It takes a long time and we want to protect a good or one good carrier. Radar training, I guess so. I want to do it, just priorities. How are we doing down here? Support the attack. Join the attack. Support the attack. I thought there were more units. The muscles are shattered. Or completely disorganized. That's getting ground up down there. Okay, deep battle document. Okay, advance. Well, I'm going to start now doing the 30 and 43s. Small warship sonar. Sonar. Here. Is that what I'm looking at? Small warship sonar advance. Okay. Oh, okay. Here we go. So we want to stop that. That's what we need to stop. Medium armored designs. And we can now do sonar detection equipment advance. All right, we'll do that one. Operation Barbarossa, Auf Munch Befehl. Not exactly sure what that does, but preparation for Barbarossa or some such thing, I think. Let's save that since we're getting ready for Barbarossa. And then of course we also have Barbarossa, which I take it to be the actual start the war with the Soviets, just in case. I think we need to do it first, but just... Okay, so we won here, we pushed across the river. And now counterattacking into us. So, SSHQs have advanced. Very good. That one we will decide to do, mostly because they are good at suppression. For when we go more into the Soviet Union, that'll be helpful. Or are we still defending down here? Yeah. We should be doing just fine though. Now the question for me comes down to some. Okay, none of these guys are really looking at the. How much do I move to the front lines to invade versus how much do I have here to do a naval invasion? Sort of my thought. So I put most of these down here. Got a lot of naval air power out here. Too far out there. Oh, well, let's put a patrol. I think, I don't know. I think just patrol. We've won, so now these look ever so tiny bit faster. New support tech. Push. Desert divisions. Or I think it's desert. Yes. Okay, do we stop. Well, already got some of those guys. I'll come down here through a town and territory. Oh, okay. Yes. You guys get on board ship. I gotta rebuild some units. I pulled away, I unbalanced some units and I never rebalanced them by getting proper transports or whatever. They were sort of set up to go for Barbarossa. Or no, for Gibraltar. Now that we're getting ready for Barbarossa, we may want to have those divisions more mobile and less specifically tuned for an invasion. Don't know if we'll ever find them properly in time again to get those things correct, but I don't know. You're coming out here. Just in case there's an invasion, we'll have some armor. Forces of some usefulness. Turkey, give them money for fuel. Okay. Counterattacking us. Which one was that? Commando training. I think that's... Yeah, we'll let that continue. You need a core command, don't you? Yeah, you look like a good candidate. This is going to be an exciting, maybe interesting, definitely. Will I be able to do this? Okay, you can sort of divide things into different ways. Obviously, that's an obvious sort of statement, but I sort of divide warfare into two big general types of warfare. Sort of, if you will, one sort of warfare, maneuver, and decision is one type of warfare. And a good person who fought that way was Napoleon. You look at, and I forget some of the names of the battles, but right around this area against the Austrians, I think maybe a bit more up here. And, you know, he's being marched upon by 3 or was it 4 Austrian armies that were easily equipped, so much better than Napoleon's armies. This is during his during the French Revolutionary period, and the revolutionary French invading into Italy, spreading nationalism and leveling and theoretically democracy, I guess, but the democracy of the guillotine, the democracy of the mob, against imperialism of Austria over, you know, sort of foreign ruling over other nations, which there really hadn't been too much thought for most people on the idea of rulers are foreign. They're just the rulers. Because you mean that because they don't speak the same language? Well, rulers don't speak the same language as the peasants. On the simplest term, often the peasants didn't read or write. The rulers did, if you look back in history. You know, so sort of nationalism, sort of didn't start with the French Revolution for sure. We can point back to the Declaration of Albroth, in what, I want to say 1320, Robert the Bruce and whatever, the Scots, sort of as a nationalistic declaration against English occupation, which, you know, this is the time in which, you know, the Duke of Normandy, you know, Normandy is maybe English, and some of these other areas are, you know, had been long, well, no, they weren't English, but they were owned by the English king, and so, you see, it didn't really matter to the people on the ground. The peasants were the peasants. Did the lord, the whoever, speak French or speak English? Didn't really matter, and even that, the languages within, you know, various types of French and degrees of sophistication varied greatly. So, so back to Napoleon. So these armies that are approaching him from multiple directions, one from the north, one from the east, and one from the south, each one the best equipped army at the time in the world, and no one disputes this, was the Austrian army. How much did it change by World War I? From in about 100 years, it went from being the best in the world for equipment. Man, the Austrians had rapid-firing air rifles. You understand that, people? The Austrian army of the early Napoleonic Wars had rapid-firing air rifles. You go, air rifle. Yeah, but these air rifles, you probably get 20 to 30 shots out of a charge and out of an air bottle, and that were shooting out at the same speeds as a musket, and it was rifled. It's an air rifle, so that they had the accuracy of a rifle coming out at musket-powered speeds, and they were musket balls coming out of them, and so that these were like, you go pop, and then click, 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 pop, click, 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 move with just a couple little things that sort of puts another round into the chamber. It's about that fast. You could empty the gun just under a minute. You could empty and now some of the descriptions, they finally, I think, basically figured out the air rifle that's often talked about in the Lewis and Clark expedition to the Pacific, all the way across here, that and sort of amazed people and the Indians and whatnot, was one of these Austrian air rifles from rather earlier. But whether it was that or something else, but it was a high-powered air rifle. They had these, and they issued them out. They eventually pulled them off. They had troubles. The biggest trouble was keeping the thing sealed. And like I say, it it was really hard to load the cylinders. You came with like a bicycle pump, and you had there's one leather surviving pouch that had two of the bottle for the metal bottle that the air was kept in was actually the shoulder stock of the rifle, so you would screw it on and unscrew it from there, and so you'd have one on the rifle and two in this leather pouch thing that would hold it, so you'd have three of those. Was sort of thought to be the standard loadout for these air rifles. And so, do they shoot 10 rounds effectively? Well, probably if you get tired pumping those things up, especially after you're putting all that air pressure in, and it takes many, 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 many strokes to pump up. It's no faster loading and shooting one of these air rifles than it is to shoot a musket if you count in. Well, they also had like a big sort of machine, that you towed on a wagon. Just normal wagon weight, but something that was big that could pump up the. So they even had this machine that went on, that was on a wagon, like a standard four-wheeled wagon, that could pump them up much faster. That you still had to have somebody turning a big crank or people turning a big crank. So it was still, still a human or animal, I forget what, powered, and that would do it much more efficiently. But you had to drag the wagon around with you. But loading and shooting the air rifle was probably just about as fast as shooting a regular musket if you count loading up the air bottles. Now, figure at this time, most soldiers in their pack for their cartridges had like 30 rounds or less. The British and some of their loadouts with their wooden blocks I've looked into it, had super high amounts at like 60 rounds, and that's like ready to go ammunition. 60 rounds is super high for the period that you were carrying. Most soldiers may have carried some loose balls, may have had some loose powder, but not a whole lot. So, definitely less than 100 rounds. But you could get through, say, the 60 rounds. You have a properly loaded up 20 round pressure air bottle in them, between putting on the, swapping out the bottles, you could probably get them all out within 5 minutes or less, and you're sort of done. And it's sort of like, well, now what do you do with these soldiers? And this is what you see later in the end of the 19th century, when you're getting multiple shot rifles in which they want magazine cutoffs to force soldiers to hand load each round, so they just don't blow all their ammunition out in a matter of seconds or just a few minutes, as soldiers might want to do. But so you have this idea that they had these air rifles that, you know, yeah, they could dump a lot of rounds into the enemy fast. They were never going to be, and the Austrians knew this, that it was never going to be the general issue weapon. They couldn't, and this is why to my understanding, is the air rifles worked very well when they're trying to sort of mass produce them for some of their light infantry or skirmish type units. Like, that's where the quality starts suffering some. And so trying to, you know, because they didn't have proper rubber air seals, so they were using leather, oiled leather, and trying to keep all the air pressure. And so they had a real sort of problem maintaining these rifles on a military campaign, and it just sort of became sort of too much work to keep a few of these guys, which was almost a machine gun in those days. And so they had that. They had the Doppelschützen, which I don't know if you've watched some Hold Fast. I keep complaining I want my Doppelschützen, double shot, and that was another really good rifle, which you see one that they sort of disguise as something else in the movie The Big Sky, starring Kirk Douglas, about, again, people going up the Missouri River, not the Lewis and Clark expedition, but that, in which that is it's a rifle and a musket. It has 2 triggers on it, 2 locks, you know, with 2 hammers, you know, the cocking on it, 1 on each side. One fires a rifled, and then this was quite common within the Austrian army at the time, a rifled barrel, and the other one fired a smoothbore. So the idea is that if you're in some place and you're in sort of a good position and the enemy's sort of way off, you can load and shoot slowly with the rifled round. You're under cover. The enemy are sort of standing out in the open because, you know, big masses of numbers. And can't really do anything to you because you're sort of out of range for muskets, and you're, you know, in the bushes behind a wall, whatever. And so you're effectively killing the enemy. Maybe, I don't know the Austrians' policy at the time on targeting officers. That was definitely the British rifles' theory, was to target the enemy's officers, but wasn't so much the Prussian thoughts of it. But I think, you know, so, but they're out there targeting. So long range, you're sort of loading and shooting your rifle, and it's good and it's effective. Now, what often happens is when you're not in a good position and the enemy aren't, you know, staying well away from you, they're sending out their skirmishers, and their skirmishers are coming after you. Sometimes when they were, you know, fighting their skirmishers before, you know, the German various Freikorps type units, they may be armed with rifles, often just a Jaeger hunting rifle, and each guy may have a different caliber and whatnot, but real professional kind of guys, hunters, but, you know, coming out of the sort of the civilian market, if you will. Civilian weapons used to be more dangerous than military weapons because they want to ban military weapons, but not, well, civilian weapons traditionally had been more dangerous. And so you have the smoothbore, which is either as an emergency shot, sometimes with a buck and ball load, I believe they were doing it. So like, oops, we're being rushed by, you know, other skirmishers, so that you can, once they get closer, you shoot with your smoothbore, or just simply as if you're out skirmishing or whatever, or you've fallen back onto your main sort of unit that you're with, and you're lining up in 2 or 3 ranks deep. And the reason you do that, the reason these people lined up and presented themselves as a target, is because if you were out there rifle skirmishing, or just everybody out there taking cover, in comes the cavalry, and they'll trample you and cut you with swords, and there's nothing you can really do. You needed that close mass protection to not get killed by the cavalry. So, but if you fell back to that, you could then load and shoot your Doppelschützen through the smoothbore with the rest of the musket guys, so that you're all firing at the same rate of fire. You're firing fast, or like if you're out there skirmishing with the enemy, you're loading and shooting fast if they're close, and so you're doing that fast. So the Austrians had this great and the best logistics at the time. They just had the best army at the time. But as I sort of hinted with the wagons for pumping up the air cylinders, they were heavily laden down with logistics because they had really good logistics. Well, so Napoleon's being, marched on by armies each of basically equal strength. Well, what he does is, they're coming from different directions. So instead of waiting for them to get to him, he immediately marches off and hits one of them, and then marches to the other one and hits another one, then marches to the other one and hits them, and destroys them in turn. So this is a war of maneuver and decision. That's one type of war. The other type of war is a war of attrition. Now, or a battle. In this Napoleonic case, it could be he gets into, instead of marching around, tries to get behind a river or other place, and then now some of his problems is because the armies are bigger and more of them. They can surround him, so they could just go, oh, okay, you're surrounded, because you're there, and so we'll just wait you out until you starve. That's part of the Austrian idea and plan. So if he were to, say, entrench himself to fight a war of attrition, say if you're, I don't know, well, let's go for an extreme example. In Gibraltar, you entrench yourself, and the Spanish are out there, you're the British and Spanish are out there, and you can wave and shoot at them because so long as you can bring in food and supplies via the sea, it can be an endless war of attrition. They can fire artillery at you, and periodically some artillery round will kill somebody. And you can shoot some artillery back at them. And you'll kill some of them. And it's just pure war of attrition. And that's sort of how the various battles, there were periodic attempts to do sort of naval assaults on the Gibraltar Peninsula. But so if you can set up a situation though where you have a protected supply line, okay, and then you can say entrench. Classic example, World War I. You can entrench, and so that becomes a war of attrition now, or a battle. Sometimes it's just a localized battle. Other times it's the war. Who can produce the most ammunition? Who can produce the most weapons? And who can produce the most people? That's a war of attrition. So there's these two basic types of war. Guerrilla wars are wars of attrition. When the North Vietnamese tried to do a battle of maneuver and decision, the Tet Offensive, it failed miserably. Now, because the U.S., because they sort of had pulled off on attacks and stopped doing things, getting ready for this, the U.S. had started, hey, we're winning, we're winning, we're winning, we're winning, to the American people at home, and then, oh shit, this thing happens. Destroyed the government's credibility with the people. How do we know if we're winning? You told us we're winning, and we haven't. We just had this major offensive. So it appeared like the Tet Offensive was effective for, for the North Vietnamese in America. So it was, because part of warfare is perception. But on the battlefield, it was a disaster for the Vietnamese. When they tried to have a war of decision, it even failed against many ARVN units. Now a bunch of ARVN units were shocked all to hell, and they sort of needed rescue by the Americans. But there were other ones that fought really hard. Very rarely did ARVN units just surrender in mass. I'm not talking about some lone outpost somewhere in it, but large formations or cities. So, even there, it failed. And so you have that. So now, to fight, if World War II is a war of attrition, which can be seen because you can talk about fighting spirit of warfare, and you can talk about how the Japanese are sort of the extreme of that, and how that will bring victory. It won't. It is important because if you were to have, I don't know, the best equipped and, well, let's just say best equipped army in the world, and you don't have any fighting spirit, you can have the Germans just come over and crush you. Is what happened. We can talk about certain deficiencies in tanks and other things that the French had, most assuredly, but they were thought to be, if not the superpower, the biggest and most powerful of great powers. The Europeans really didn't know what the Soviets were doing. They were a bigger power than the French were, but no one knew it. More tanks, more whatever. Soviets caused a problem. So if World War II, and it ended up being, because all you have to do is a war of maneuver and decision. To change it into a war of attrition, all you have to do is not lose, okay? If France had somehow been able to not lose the Battle of France, we don't care whether Paris, is saved or it falls to invasion. But if you had, been able to, I'm not saying they would have been able to, but had you, I don't know, the Loire River and the Somme down here, or Saône. Sorry, I don't know some of these. I know the Rhone and whatever, but pick some of these rivers, and if the Italians weren't in the war, and they were able to just sort of like go, oh, okay, we're down here, and then, but we still have the French Empire, we still have the British Greater Empire, building, bullets, so to feed into the machine guns, building artillery, producing artillery rounds to go into the artillery pieces. Had you just been able to do that, you then turn it into a war of production, because unlike other wars, it's no longer people running around with sharp, pointy things and stabbing it into each other. Because you can take a thin piece of wood, carve it into sort of a point and fire harden it, and go shove it through another person, okay? Obviously, armor more easily defeats wood, but still, you can still shove it into another person. So metal, sharp, and it's pretty easy to make sharp, pointy things in metal. So all you have to do is have, you don't have to have a really high-tech sword that's really nice. And if you've ever held a real sword, you know what I mean. And I don't mean a sword you buy today. I think 99% of the swords you buy today, and I know some people are really proud of the sword they bought from such and such catalog, but 99% of the swords you buy today are big freaking knives. Okay? They're big freaking knives. If you've held a real sword, you'll see the blade flexes. It's alive. You're not going to be able to chop through big heavy pieces of armor with it. Just because it is a sort of very delicate, very sort of maneuver thing. And you can sort of, fencing foils are obviously sort of an extreme sporting utility thing, but it's sort of the idea of that, a real proper, not just, because not all ancient swords are high-tech things. Some things are blasted out by blacksmiths, just real blacksmiths. Yeah, I've seen somebody hold a sword. I can make one of those. No, you can make a sharp, pointy thing out of metal, but to hold a real swordsmith, it's a different thing, and you need that thing because to be able to do sword fighting properly, it's different. And so a lot of the swords are just not. I happen to have one just from the end of the Napoleonic period. At least that's what a few sort of knowledgeable people have said, that's when they think it's from. And it is very much sort of like that. So it's, just at the end of the period that they're using. And you can get those kind of swords around, a lot of 19th century swords, military swords are that way. Cavalry officer swords. But I'm talking about the stuff you buy. Used to be, I don't know if it's still around, museum replicas catalog. Lots of cool swords in there, but they're big knives. They're way too heavy, because if you go look at what's in the museum, if you ever have the opportunity to get behind the scenes of a museum and put on the white gloves and hold some of these really ancient blades, they are light. And especially in the post sort of armor world, because now you're just cutting through cloth and things, they're light. And compared to what you'll see in a lot of these other things. So, but that, that's a piece of high-tech thing. You can just make a spear point, or a some sort of dagger, or just sharp pointy thing with metal. That's pretty easy to do, to stab through humans even in armor. So humans are sort of the thing. But get to World War II, even World War I, you can have the greatest fighting spirit in the world, but if you can't build enough aircraft. Oh yeah, we've got great warrior spirit, Japan. Yeah, we're gonna go. Our pilots are willing to go fight and die. Yeah, but do you have fuel to train them? Do you have enough aircraft to train them? No, so that they become human missiles into ships, the kamikazes. And even those guys, are barely trained, can barely fly straight and level enough to hit the ship. They're willing to do that warrior spirit thing, but boy, the well-trained American pilots that are coming over, and you know, that America is able to build aircraft and be able to train the people and put that through, they're going to win. So Germany's, in the World War II sense, Germany's always going to lose the war of attrition. If you can turn it into a war of decision, and often to get the decisions, it's a maneuver situation, Germany can win. And then partly by that is it's eliminating enemies, eliminating whoever the enemy is here. Not that they're necessarily taking all of the Soviet Union, but they are taking big chunks of the Soviet Union, and whatever the rump state will be, whether it's a rump Soviet state or a rump Russian Federation or something that's, you know, just beyond the Urals, so it's beyond these, or it's maybe at least beyond Moscow, maybe it still includes some of this territory, or whatever, that's still more or less free and independent, meaning there's no Germans running around telling anybody what to do. It's, you know, it's beyond any of the sort of commissars over here in the west of Russia, not commissar, what's the I forget the I forget, sorry, not the commissar, but you know what I'm talking about, the puppet policing zones. I sort of think of them, they're not even really independent states, but you know, outside of any sort of direct German occupation of any sort, you'll have a nation that may be starting to rebuild its military, may be starting to get ready to go back to war with them, but they're not actively at war with them. So that's taken out of the equation. And then, of course, if you've been able to knock Britain out of the war one way or another, then, you know, Germany then can build its industry to face against the Americans and face against resurgent anybody else. But so long as you keep the Soviets in the war, so long as you keep Britain in the war, so long as you get America into the war, then Germany's always going to lose, barring some sort of true super weapon, you know, nukes, and not just one or two nukes, but a flurry of nukes, be able to drop, if you talk about the Hiroshima type bombs, be able to drop 20 or 30 of them. The US couldn't do it. I don't think Germany, and I've now come to the conclusion, compared to some of the earlier series, I think it was maybe Vince I was chatting with in the past years ago now, but it's been that long. And I was poo-pooing the idea because I know some of the buildings still exist that are, you know, in Tennessee, where they built whole sort of cities, but huge factories. I've seen some tours through that are with centrifuge, you know, early centrifuge machines to be able to build the few bombs that they built. So they built a couple of test bombs, and you know, the two that were dropped, and I think they were, you know, sort of working on a couple of more or something like that. But the huge amount of industry involved in it, I did not see, and I still don't see that level of production in Germany. But been a few bit more pieces of evidence that I think they were further along than they were, but they were nowhere close to getting it. They weren't being bombed all to hell, and they weren't, you know, losing. 46, maybe. I'm thinking really, though, more 47, 48. Maybe. Again, if they were undisturbed by what was actually happening. So they weren't close, but they were heading in that direction. But even if they got a few, okay, you can say goodbye to London. You maybe even say goodbye to New York. But, you know, it's not going to take America out. And they just really didn't have that ability unless they could have a flurry of those. So who's going to win the continental war of attrition? If it's, you know, if it's Germany and puppets over here, including Britain as a puppet, versus the Americas, that would be an interesting war. You know, how long until either side starts getting ICBMs and whatnot and starts nuking each other? Yeah, that's probably where it would have headed at that point. But so Germany's always going to lose. So if we can keep this being a war of decision, because I'm thinking of starting here in very few days, then I think we can win against the Soviet Union. If it becomes a war of attrition, I don't know that we can. Now, what will be an interesting test, you know, and I'm not going to play to sort of, oh, well, let's just go and take a big, you know, let's go take sort of historical chunks out of, you know, out of it, not push on Moscow, not, you know, sort of do with history to see then if we could fight that. I'm going to give it my best shot at defeating the Soviets. I'm going to do everything I can to effectively defeat the Soviets. But if I can't, that'll be interesting. Now, what I fear for the series is a stalemate, because like we were having in the most recent previous series of Italy, that, yeah, I got to the point that every time I make a landing or whatever, and yeah, okay, get in, defeat whatever, like minor Soviet forces there, send in reinforcements, and then the Soviets would come in and I could maybe hold out. Maybe hold out. Or if I'm lucky, retreat. And as people saying, well, you're helping the Germans by diverting forces. Yeah, but the Germans weren't massively pushing in either. So it's the AI versus the AI. And I was losing ground in Turkey. And how long is it going to be interesting to watch me slowly lose the war? Now, if it's dramatic loss, well then cool, because, you know, that's sort of a desperate fight for Berlin. It'd be cool, and sort of at the end, last battle, you guys would probably want to watch that. But the year of games, so literally 365 days of playing it, to get to that point might be very boring, and I lose everybody. So that's sort of what I'm worried about that. So it's not that I have a great fear of losing, it's just, well, actually, you know, let's, oh, we've won down here, cool. I think it's this one we won. Okay, yeah, we're still pushing up there. Let's save this. Thank you, motorcycle. Okay, well, we're going to end the episode here, because I'm hoping to sort of, not quite on the very first day, but very much start the next episode as Barbarossa starting. That's what I'm hoping to do here. I do know and think that the invasions around the Black Sea can be delayed by a few days or a few weeks. The invasions up here, whether it's naval, I mean, that's why I'm sort of sending people here first, because I don't know how much I want to try to land in Murmansk versus trying to fight my way across this river. Both are options that I'm willing to, or maybe thinking of doing, you know, both, pushing here and then invading around behind. Those can come a few days later, but it's really sort of bursting out of here. And this is going to be a slightly different strategy I'm trying than my last two big playthroughs. I've radically reduced these forces. It may not look that way, but particularly from armored forces, still got a few, because I'd always try to sort of create a strong army group center here, and then try to pocket units in here. And normally do that, but what I've really sort of noticed with that is, and I don't know, it seems, I presume it's historically correct for the time period, but this particularly massively slowed me down. Just trying to get around this just slowed down these forces heavily. And there is a path through here, through some of these provinces somewhere in here to get through, but I think there is, no, I think there is a straight up line in here, but of nothing to get around, so you can't move through here entirely. And so getting around this has always been a major problem for me. So I've concentrated a lot more forces up here. See that stack there, and got these guys here, including a bunch of a little bit there, but not. Okay, oh, we gotta get these guys here up. These guys gotta get forward, these Stugs and light forces. So I'm looking at a strong sort of army group north, moving up this way, and trying to get around this as fast as possible, moving towards Moscow. But I'm also trying to see about, because I got a lot of forces here, of trying to swing, because again, the way I like to play is to see opportunities and take advantage of them. So it's sort of like water flowing between the cracks. And that often draws me down into this way with a lot of this forces. And that isn't a bad strategy, if you think about it. Coming down the, heading for Stalingrad ultimately. And, but this time, and normally it's right in here that's normally fairly weak. So what I'm really sort of wanting to try to do, and I don't know if I'll be able to successfully do it, just my own temperament. Got a lot more army corps than I need. A lot of these guys. They're fairly cheap, and they're sort of weakish divisions, so they're probably how they're going to end up being used. Unfortunately, though, these 8 HQs don't give combined arms bonuses, so they're weak divisions. And part of the Revolver Held has been doing a lot of historical army corps. The problem is I'm doing 5 division army corps, where a lot of times historically there were 3 divisions. So you need a lot more at 3 than you do at 5. But what I really want to try to do is push fast through here. And still try to push down this way too, but try to push fast straight through here. As well as pushing fast through these forests to try to create a big sort of pocket in here. Not that I'm not going to advance. I am going to advance in here. I'm not going to. I've watched people, oh, watch me create this big pocket, and they have a front line, and they just don't move that front line. They don't even attack on it. And then swing all the way around it. Not that it doesn't work to win the game, but it's quite unhistorical. So we will be pushing around. We've got quite a few forces here, so yeah, it's pretty good. But I want to try to use this to create a pocket in here. So we're looking at that. But we're also looking at a very strong southern campaign as well. The HQs made it here, along with some headquarters, so fighting in the mountains, good. Okay, these guys are here. We got some real armored divisions, some good ones. We're trying to get the okay, there's the 18th Army headquarters. Can't get it too much closer in time. Eventually, though, it'll sea transport to here at some point, I do believe. So, sort of what I'm looking at there. We do have a lot of forces. Some of them are down here. The mountain troops here. These guys. A bunch of infantry divisions that I'm looking at using to invade in this part of the world. Got these guys. A bunch of those are mountains. Some of them are, Panzer Grenadiers for mountain operations in and around here. These guys here and up, they're going to be pushing against the Soviets. Maybe at first against nobody, but that's what we're looking at. And it does both hearten me and dismay me, all these armored units down here. And they may be a lot of just sort of armored brigades as opposed to armored divisions, but doesn't mean that these guys are wasted. They can just wait. I don't really want to bring Iran into the war because of this. They're not ready to stand up against whatever the Soviets will throw at them. So we're looking at that. Okay. Thanks for watching. Thanks for liking the videos. Really do appreciate that. And of course, please post questions, comments, suggestions, ideas. Love hearing from you. See you next time for more Hearts of Iron.